So I, 17, female, recently did something that everyone's really mad at me about, and I don't know what to think right now. I have been living with just my dad for the last couple of weeks because my mother had to go to LA for an assignment. My mom, 42, female, and my dad, 48, male, got married around the time that they found out that she was pregnant and have been together since then. My mother had never been married before, and I was her first child, but my dad had a daughter from his previous relationship. My half sister, let's call her Dana, 22, female, is pretty annoying and entitled, and we have never really gotten along. My dad never married her mother, and they had only been together for about a year when her mother found out that she was pregnant. They had always been thinking about breaking up when Dana's mother found out about the pregnancy. However, they tried to make things work when it was found out that she was pregnant. Unfortunately, that relationship did not last long, and they ended up breaking up shortly after Dana was born. They did work out a co parenting agreement, and Dana would spend her weeks traveling between parents' houses. About 3 years after Dana was born, my dad met my mother at a conference and asked her out. They started dating, and after 2 years, they got married and had me. My father continued to raise Dana, and my mother didn't have a problem with that. But growing up, Dana and I were never close. I remember my father would try his very best to try and get us to be friends, but I don't know. Neither of us really took to each other. We were a far cry from being half sisters or whatever, and we were not even friends. But that's how it was when we were kids, and gradually even my dad realized that we were not interested in being friends with each other, so he stopped trying to get us to be friends. However, I had a great relationship with my dad, and I was pretty close to him. Whenever Dana was not around, I would have a great time being at home with my parents. I just didn't like whenever she would come over because then she would try to hog all the limelight, and it was easier for her because my dad only saw her on Fridays and the weekends. So it was understandable that my dad would give her a little more attention when she was around because it would only be a short while before she would go back to her mother again. I know she will never admit to it, but there was some degree of sibling rivalry. My father, however, was a good dad to me, and I have to give credit where it's due. And as we started growing up, I started caring less about outdoing Dana or whatever. But I don't think she ever got over that phase because even after she got into college, she didn't stop her silly, childish behavior and would try to put me down for attention. She would brag about the fabulous college that she got into, even though I was literally just 13 at the time and wasn't even thinking about colleges. She would brag about her grades and try to show off how smart she was, even though I was better than her at her age. She would also brag about how much fun she was having at college every time she would come back home for the holidays. I thought it was really weird and unnecessary, and would sometimes make fun of her right to her face, which would really annoy her, and we would end up getting into subtle passive aggressive catfights. That all came to an end a couple of years ago, though, after her mom's passing away. I think it was a week before she graduated when we got the news that Dana's mother had passed away from a sudden heart attack. It was a really sad event because she was not even 50 at the time and she was just really young. Unfortunately, she had a really stressful lifestyle, and the doctor said that she had been told repeatedly that she needed to get regular checkups, but she did nothing to change things. It was a huge shock for the family because nobody even knew that she had been suffering for so long. Apparently, she had been having heart problems for a long time, but she hadn't told anybody about it. This shook Dana up, and after the funeral, something changed, and it was not for the better at all. It's really unfortunate, but due to the shock of the event, Dana started binge eating and developed a disorder. At first, it was barely even noticeable, but over time, we started noticing the signs. She had been living with us at the time, and it was me who told my father that I was concerned about her. And it wasn't even in a mocking way. I was genuinely worried because she was out of control. So my dad and I did a lot of research and we decided it was time for my dad to talk to her about therapy and do something about this because things had to change. She was not happy about it in the least, and Dana blamed me, saying that this was just a ploy for me to get attention, and apparently I only wanted to label her as crazy. I honestly wish that was the case because then at least she would be safe from an eating disorder. But unfortunately, that was not the truth, and I really wanted to help her. After a lot of discussion, rebellion, and bargaining, Dana finally agreed to get help because she had ballooned up to an enormous size and it was absolutely not healthy. So she finally went, and it took several months, but we started seeing improvement in her condition. She had already graduated by then and had been sitting at home because she was depressed, and understandably so. But after almost a year of her mother's passing, Dana decided that she was going to start looking for a job, and she found one within a couple of weeks, despite my personal differences with her. She was actually a pretty good student and had great grades. She got hired pretty quickly. Within a few months, she was out of here. That was literally just half a year ago, and I expected her to stay in her own apartment after that, but for some reason, she decided that she didn't want to live on her own anymore and wanted to move back. I had no idea why she thought that it was a good idea, especially when she could afford to live on her own. But she's unpredictable, and my dad had started coddling her ever since her mother passed away, so he said yes, without thinking twice. Unfortunately, my parents and I had also moved out of our old house a couple of weeks ago and moved into a new house that we had bought because we didn't want to pay rent anymore and wanted something of our own. We hadn't even fully finished unpacking yet, but my mother had a huge work opportunity in LA and she had to go. She left within the first week and my dad and I did all the unpacking. Our new house has 4 bedrooms. One was supposed to be mine and one was supposed to be for my parents, and the other 2 were meant to be for guests. One of the guest rooms was obviously intended for Dana and the other one was for other people. It's a pretty spacious house. But the problem is that we have been using one of the guest rooms as a makeshift storeroom right now, so it's uninhabitable. And the other room that's empty doesn't even have a bed yet. Our previous house was already pre-furnished before we moved in, so we didn't have to buy a lot of things. This one, however, doesn't come with its own furniture, and my parents have already spent a lot of money. So buying a bed right now and furnishing 2 rooms that would probably not even be of any use for a long time didn't seem necessary. So we just left that room empty since we didn't know that Dana would randomly decide to move back in one day. But yeah, that happened 2 weeks ago. My father just told me that she would be moving in with us, and I was expected to share my room with her because the other 2 rooms were uninhabitable. I was outraged because I'm a 17-year-old and I need my own privacy. I also didn't want to share my room with Dana because I found her annoying, and I never had liked her and never would like her. I fought with my father a lot and even tried to get my mother to interfere. But she just told me that she was busy with work, and this was really petty of me since apparently the poor girl had just recently lost her mother and was trying to get back on her feet, so I should be there for her instead of rejecting her. My dad also had similar opinions on this and said that it was my moral duty to make Dana feel as welcome as I could instead of acting like a brat. I personally didn't think I was acting like a brat at all, and I honestly felt like this was Dana being entitled. I mean, honestly, she was working and earning her own money, so there was no reason that she couldn't live on her own. At least until the other room was furnished, or maybe she could just buy the bed herself and move into the other room. But apparently she just wanted to move back here because she was lonely and also because she was saving up to quit her job and start something of her own small business for all ages right now. I even suggested that she sleep on the couch or something, but she wasn't on board with it because she said that it would hurt her back. And she already had a lot of issues with her back from when she was struggling with her weight, so that was not happening. And so I was told that I would have to share my room with Dana, and there was no way out of this. The saddest part of this was that I had to sleep on the floor in my own room, and I could tell that Dana was really enjoying this experience. She moved in 1.5 weeks ago, and it has been a nightmare for me since then. Not only is she literally the most annoying person to live with, but she's also a total slob, and I can't deal with that. She is constantly talking to people on the phone as loudly as she can, and it's really disturbing when I'm trying to study. So I have to finish all my homework before she comes back home, and I don't even get to rest when I come back from school because I only have a couple of hours before she comes back. She also made a mess of my room pretty much on the day that she moved in with me, and it was horrible. No matter how much I clean up, it's always the very next day. I complained about it to my dad after dinner one day last week, but he told me that I just had to suck it up and deal with it because she was going through something, and as a family, we had to be there for her. And he was right. Maybe I have had my own problems, but at least my mother is still alive, and so is my dad. So I don't really know how she feels. Besides, she's still recovering from an eating disorder, and that couldn't have been easy, so I was willing to cut her some slack and give her the benefit of the doubt. However, 3 days ago, she really crossed a line, and I just couldn't take it anymore, so I snapped. 3 days ago, I left really early in the morning to go to a friend's house, and I spent almost the entire day there. I came back home in the evening because it was a Saturday and I didn't have school the next day, so I could do whatever I wanted. I was in a great mood until I came back to my room and saw all my clothes lying on the floor, and it appeared to me that most of my outfits had been either stretched out or, even worse, torn. I was horrified because I couldn't even imagine why anybody would do this until Dana came back into my room and told me that she could explain. Apparently, she had been trying on all my outfits because she needed something pretty to wear to a co-worker's wedding next week, and she couldn't find anything in her own belongings that still fit. She was smiling at me while she told me this and had a really smug look on her face because she knew exactly what she was doing. She had known all along, and she was just trying to mess with me. She knew that if her own clothes didn't fit her anymore, there was no way on earth that my clothes would fit her because I am several sizes smaller than her. She knew that. But it didn't stop her from trying on all my clothes because she knew that it would pretty much ruin them or tear them, and it would become all loose and weird on me after that. She had done this on purpose, and she wanted me to know, which is why she had laid it all out on the floor for me to see when I came back home. It was pretty diabolical, and for the first couple of minutes, I didn't even have anything to say to her because I was just that horrified. She continued to smile at me while I just stared down at the mess she had created. But then I lost my temper, and I did something that I was not very proud of. I walked right up to her and smacked her on the face. I had been stretched pretty thin already, and everybody had been testing my patience with her by forcing me to live with her and sleep on the floor of my own room, just because her mother had passed away and she was using that to her advantage shamelessly. After I smacked her, there was no looking back because she had a significant advantage over me. Since she was quite bigger, and soon enough we were in a full-blown brawl. I got a few good scratches in, and she took out my hair, but I was glad that I got to hit her, and even though I'm not very proud of it, she deserved it. My dad had heard us fighting, and it took him a while, but he was able to break us up eventually. I thought that he would at least ask us what happened, but he didn't even wait and just started yelling at me about my behavior. He didn't even bother to wait for an explanation and just assumed that this was all my fault. He told me that I had been behaving like a spoiled brat ever since Dana moved in with us, and he needed me to cut it out because otherwise he would have to kick me out and send me to live with my grandparents. He thought that I was being entitled, and apparently I was being heartless and petty by putting Dana through so much and tormenting her all the time. He was saying all the right things, but to the wrong person. I was so disappointed and hurt that I didn't even say anything to him. and just let him yell at me while Dana enjoyed the show. It was extremely disappointing for me because I had always firmly believed that my father loved the two of us equally and would never pick sides. But as of now, Dana was using her trauma from her mother's passing and the eating disorder to seem like a victim and was shamelessly milking it just to get me in trouble. Let me just remind you guys that this is a 22-year-old woman with a job that we are talking about and not some 15-year-old with unsolved issues. She knows exactly what she's doing, but I don't know why she's doing it. I was really hurt and upset, and after my dad was done yelling at me, I grabbed my phone and stormed out of the house. Nobody tried to stop me because they knew that I didn't have anywhere else to go, so I would be back in a couple of hours anyway. And they were right. I didn't have anywhere else to go, so I decided to go take a walk in the park. I was fuming, and even walking wasn't helping me cool down. So in the heat of the moment, I opened social media and decided to make a post about my dad and Dana. As soon as I started typing, the words started flowing out because I was really very upset about all of this, and I didn't have to think much about what I wanted to say. I told everybody in the post about how my dad had been behaving and how my mother also seemed to be on his side because they believed that Dana was some long-suffering figure and deserved our sympathy. But the truth was that she was only using her mother's demise as a cover-up for her own terrible behavior, and it was disgusting, but it was exactly what she was doing. She was just so good at it that people were finding it hard to deduce that she was actually just putting on an act to show people how upset she was, and then she could get away with anything she wanted to do. And for some reason, she was using our parents' sympathy for her to make my life a living nightmare. I don't know why she was doing it, but I did know that it was working. And I couldn't take it anymore because it was downright torture for me now. After typing it all out, I posted it and then decided to walk it off. I think I must have been walking for about 2 hours and my phone has switched off, so I had no idea about what was going on behind the scenes. After I was done walking, I started heading back home to face the music. I knew that I was going to get yelled at for the post, but I didn't anticipate that my dad would threaten to kick me out. The second I walked into the house, my dad and Dana started screaming at me about where I had been and demanded an explanation for what I had just posted. I told them as calmly as I could that the post was exactly how I felt, and it was long overdue because the two of them had been very difficult to live with, and I couldn't do this anymore. I told my father that I was sick of living with Dana because not only was she a terrible person, but she was also a huge slob, and I hated her from the bottom of my heart. At that point, Dana started crying crocodile tears, probably just to get me in more trouble, and it worked. My father started yelling at me like crazy and said that I owed her a huge apology, and it had to be a public one, just like my post had been. He said that he was ashamed of me and that he had expected so much better from me. When I told him that I was not going to apologize to anybody, he told me I could either apologize or get the heck out of his house. Apparently, he was not going to tolerate this kind of behavior, and I needed to realize that there would be consequences to my actions and I couldn't just get away with everything that I wanted to do. It was even more infuriating because once again, he was saying these things to the wrong person and Dana was the one who needed to hear it. So in a fit of rage, I told him that the house didn't even belong to him and it was actually Mom's house, so he had no right to kick me out anyway. Now, I wasn't supposed to say that because I had found out accidentally. I was going through my mother's belongings in the first few days after we had moved into the house, and at first to try and search for something that actually belonged to me. I thought that it must have gotten mixed up and was going through my mom's stuff when I found a deed to our house and it only had my mom's name on it. I thought that it was pretty suspicious, but I never brought it up with anyone because I didn't think it was my business. As long as I was getting to live in this house, I didn't really care, and I also thought that they must have talked about it and discussed these things, so I had no need to poke my nose where it didn't belong. But it just slipped out while I was fighting with my dad, and he seemed taken aback. He tried to deny it at first and said that I was lying, but I told him to go check out the deed for himself if he didn't believe me. It was under lock and key in his bedroom, and he could have checked it out whenever he wanted to, but he hadn't because he trusted my mother with the paperwork and it just didn't seem necessary at the time or even later. But when I said that, he rushed to the bedroom immediately, and even Dana was shocked. So she stopped crying. And surely enough, a couple of minutes later, my dad came out of the bedroom and he was all red in the face because what I had said turned out to be true. He asked me how long I had known, and I told him that I had known about this from pretty much the day that we moved in. After that, he went back into his room and abandoned his fight with me because, of course, this was more important. Even Dana went back into our room, but I didn't feel comfortable going back into that room, so I decided to sleep on the couch. I didn't have any back problems, so I could sleep there pretty easily. It was still better than sleeping on the floor. But I didn't really get the chance to sleep because a couple of hours after I had revealed the big secret to my father, I received a call from my mother and she put me on blast immediately. She told me that I had no right to spill something like that without first speaking to her about it, and apparently I had ruined something pretty big now. My mother told me that the house had actually been a gift from her parents because she and my father recently celebrated their wedding anniversary and my grandpa wanted to do this for them. And all the money that my parents had spent on buying the house went into the retirement fund, and my mother had been planning to tell my father about all of this on their second honeymoon that they were about to take in a couple of months when she came back from her work assignment. She had been building up to the surprise for months now, and it was going to be huge because she was even planning on paying for their vacation to the Greek islands, all from the money that they had saved from the house. Unfortunately, I had ruined the surprise, and not only that, but I had to cause a huge fight between my parents because my dad believed that my mother should have just told him instead of trying to surprise him with this. So now she had to fly back home in the middle of a really busy week and try to fix her marriage because I opened my big mouth just because I was having some petty fight with my half-sister. She also said that she was really disappointed in me, and that was pretty much the last straw for me. It was an already sucky day, and it felt like everybody was against me at that point in time. It's been a couple of days since, and nobody's speaking to me. I even took down the post, but that hasn't changed anything, and I'm still being treated like a pariah in my own home. My dad doesn't even look at me anymore, and I haven't heard from my mother yet. But I know for a fact that she isn't happy about any of this, and I'll get to hear about it when she comes back to talk to my father. Until then, it's just going to be silent in this house, and I'll just have to deal with it because I guess it might be my fault. I have been thinking about everything for a really long time now since I have a lot of time on my hands to overthink everything. And I don't know, I just feel like I could have avoided a lot of this if I had dealt with things calmly instead of trying to get back at Dana. I don't regret the fact that I attacked her when I saw what she did to my clothes, even though it seems pretty insignificant now. But I do have some regrets about the post that I made because I shouldn't have dirty laundry like that. That was unnecessary, and I guess I screwed up somehow. But also, after the way that I had been treated for weeks, anybody in my position would have lost their mind and snapped. I don't even know if I should apologize at this point or not, or even if it will make a difference to the situation. But nevertheless, AITA for making a post attacking my dad and half-sister because they were forcing me to share a room with her? Update 1. Hi, thank you guys so much for all the supportive comments and messages. I'm really grateful for all of it. And yeah, that really helped me make sense of things. And I'm doing a lot better mentally right now. I guess the fact that things have been sorted out with my parents also helps. It's been a week since I posted, and a couple of days after my post, my mother returned and we decided to have a family meeting and finally clear the air between us. Interestingly enough, that was done at a time when Dana was not at home, and even more curiously, it was my father who suggested that we do it when Dana was not at home. So they took a day off of work and waited for her to go to work, and then we decided to talk. It was kind of uncomfortable for me, But I shared my feelings with them, and everything that I said here, I told them. They actually seemed to understand, which I didn't think was possible, but they told me that they could understand where I was coming from. And then my father told me that after the huge blow up that he had with me, he decided to talk to Dana about certain things, and he realized that everything that I had said was true, and he had been a fool all along. Apparently, she had been laying it on thick and had been trying to manipulate him against me after our fight. He didn't understand what was going on, but she kept making up stuff, and after a certain point, even he knew that I was not capable of doing such things, and he could tell that something was weird. Once he figured out that she had been trying to play us all, he decided that he could no longer trust his gut about this, and decided that he was going to talk to us in person. My parents had already sorted things out between them, and they were okay with the deed and the retirement fund and everything. So this is the only thing that we actually had to discuss. After some deliberation, my parents decided that it would be for the best if we told Dana to leave, because what she had done was unacceptable, and she actually had been milking her mother's demise for something so petty that it was distasteful. So to sum it up, Dana has been asked to leave, and she threw a huge fit about it and accused me of trying to sabotage her future, which was interestingly exactly what she had been trying to do to me. So that was clearly projecting, but I finally realized why she hated me so much. It was just because she could. And she was just a terrible person who got off on other people's misery. Mystery solved. Update 2. Hi, so Dana has left, but my mother has stayed back for a couple of days more, and she believes that we need to start family therapy. She's going to join the online sessions, and we're all going to try and make this work. I have my fingers crossed, and I hope that this brings us all closer, because the last few months have been tough, and I just really want everything to go back to normal. Update 3. Hey, it's been almost a year since my last update, and I'm thrilled to inform you guys I'm starting college in a couple of weeks. I got into the school of my choice, and we are all really happy. My mother finished up her assignment a couple of months ago and has been living with us ever since, and it finally feels like a perfect family again. Dana has had no contact with us since she left. Thank God for that. Therapy has been going well, and I don't know, I feel like everything has fallen into place, and I couldn't be more grateful to the universe for it. Stay tuned for more stories from our girl relationships.